to invite you to watch a WSIS Forum video. Thank you very much. A very warm welcome to all the stakeholders who are joining us today. This is a special side event of WSIS to display the spirit of multi-stakeholderism within the WSIS process. So without any further delay, I'd like to invite Mr. Thomas Lamaneuskas, the Deputy Secretary General of ITU, to please make his opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Gitanjali. And I hope you hear me well, and really such a great pleasure to see you all today. And you know, as per the time zones that were set here, so I think we have two of them. So I'll have to say good afternoon and good morning as well to both of you. And really, I'm so happy to be joined today for this side event on of ECOSOC Partnership Forum on WSIS Cooperation for Acceleration Progress on SDGs by great colleagues who will speak here as well, and of course all of you who will hope to contribute. And of course, first of all, recognizing Dr. Tawfiq Jelassi of UNESCO, who will speak immediately after me as a great partner for UNESCO, but also other colleagues from UN, and I see colleagues from UNDP here as well. But also we'll have a great group of friends as well speaking in the session, as you will see and you just saw in the program as well. So going to the meat of it. So the theme of for this 2023 ECOSOC Partnership Forum is accelerating the recovery from the coronavirus disease and the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development at all levels. And this theme is particularly dear to me because my last role in ITU before becoming Deputy Secretary General recently was actually to help ITU to build a strategy on response in COVID-19 and seeing up close both the challenges that this pandemic has caused, but also lessons we can learn for the future. And clearly, we all saw that COVID-19 pandemic has confronted the humanity with an unprecedented challenge and set the global community back in reaching the disease targets. We could no longer take the progress for granted. But at the same time, the pandemic also illustrated the power and promise of the digital technologies and ICTs. Now, as we come to the midpoint of the implementation of 2030 agenda, we still see there is still a lot of work to be done across the world to really make progress on sustainable development. And as I mentioned before, to make sure that we actually make progress and not slide back. And it's now more urgent than ever to make a good leverage of the digital technologies to make those progress. Importantly, ladies and gentlemen, we see a lot of other global challenges beyond COVID-19. As a matter of fact, we sometimes forget, the challenges that have caused the pandemic in the current tense environment. Secretary General Antonio Guterres recently said that we are facing the greatest levels of geopolitical division amidst recent generations. We really all can witness and feel that very tense economic and financial situation across all of our countries. And of course, always looming there is the climate crisis, which is making itself more and more known. Digital development remains a source of optimism, but also to really leverage them, partnerships are key, and partnerships are key to put us back on track in achieving sustainable development. Only together we can overcome the current challenges and leverage the opportunities. And if only we can do that if everyone is part of the solution. So now coming to the WSIS process, indeed, multi-stakeholder collaboration and partnerships are two key values which underpin the WSIS process. And its essence is to cultivate and foster dialogue among stakeholders, representing a plurality of voices of ideas. And we are great. It's really great to see that our member states continue to reiterate our support for our key role as ITU in really following of the implementation of WSIS action lines and advancing the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. I also, can't miss but mention a few initiatives that ITU has had both on COVID-19 recovery and response and broader, to give a bit of a broader context. And indeed, during the pandemic, ITU has pushed to react fast, as a lot of you did and a lot of other organizations did. In the beginning, as the pandemic lockdowns have started, we launched REC for COVID Global Network Resiliency Platform to help regulators and policymakers, as well as private sector, to really share the experiences and how to best to respond. And we have collected more than 400 submissions of different regulatory and policy practices. As we moved from direct response to recovery, we launched with the support of a number of partners, starting with Saudi Arabia and Japan, and later joined by a number and a host of other partners, Connect to Recover initiative to strengthen digital resilience of countries mostly in need, which I'm proud to say now covers around 43 countries. On the WSIS side, also under our WSIS process, we launched the WSIS stock-taking COVID-19 SDKs repository to also help WSIS stakeholders to collect the best practices. So really trying to do our best to help the stakeholders to both share the best experiences and then with the practical help to respond to COVID-19 and recover from it. But as I mentioned, COVID is just one part of the challenges. And as we move now to the broader world and broader challenge of overcoming the really digital divides that impact our world and impact our digital development, we have been launching other important initiatives, and I have to really mention our partner, the Connect Digital Coalition, which so far has collected 30 billion in pledges to support digital development around the world. And of course, always happy to invite you to join. Ladies and gentlemen, this year is very important year. This year is when we do a strong progress, when we are making a strong progress on Global Digital Compact that will pave the future for the digital development at the global level. This year is when we have a SDG Summit, and which actually takes stocks of that midpoint, where we come at that midpoint of SDG development. And also, of course, we have a forthcoming WSIS Plus 20 review. And in this year, it's also, again, important for us to reiterate, our role and our preparedness to also invite all of you to our forthcoming WSIS Forum 2023, which will be the platform to discuss a lot of those issues and to gather your inputs. So WSIS Forum will be held from 13th to 17th of March in Geneva, Switzerland, and will provide opportunities for you to network, share experiences, and to really gather those inputs that could help influence and shape the big, broader global processes that are taking place today. Before I finish, I would also like to reiterate the importance of United Nations Group and International Society, which is actual organizer of today's workshop, and we see those partners, so around the table as well, as a really successful example of how the UN system can deliver as one and bring out all thoughts, but also action together. And I'm proud to be now part of this collaboration as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, digital technology, so sometimes we say ICTs, are really crucial for sustainable development. And only together we can make sure that we leverage the maximum potential of that to really make sure that we progress rather than regress on SDGs, and that we do that together. I thank you very much for this opportunity to start this workshop, and we wish you all fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lamanoskus, for highlighting the importance of WSIS action lines or ICTs in enabling the achievement or advancing the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, and for highlighting all those different partnerships where multi-stakeholderism is actually the core and the spirit of these partnerships. So thank you very much. We'd now like to move on to Dr. Tawfiq Jelassi. Dr. Jelassi, we are eager to hear about UNESCO's perspectives towards the partnerships, and also how would you describe the contribution of the WSIS process and UNGIS in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development? And of course, what have we achieved and what are the challenges that lie ahead? Over to you, Dr. Jelassi.
Thank you very much, Gitanjali. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first start by thanking Mr. Thomas Lamanoskas, new Deputy Secretary General of ITU, and thank as well the WSIS Forum partners from UNDP and UNCTAD for organizing this session on behalf of UNGIS, a session that brings together 32 international organizations on various ICT issues. Regarding your question, Gitanjali, allow me to quote the French philosopher Henri Gerson, who said, "Act as a man of thought and think as a man of action." I think this is the mindset that we should have as participating organization in WSIS. And we, as we work together to achieve the SDGs going forward, the WSIS process clearly aims to bridge the digital and the knowledge divides, as well as to promote information and communication technologies as a lever for development. Obviously, as digital connectivity and skills become more important in almost all UN programs, UNGIS allows the UN to join forces to coordinate common solutions and approaches with each other. For example, UNESCO work on open access to scientific information, which is critical for the SDGs and for developing countries' access to cutting-edge research. This work drew the attention of other UNGIS agencies. As a result, 7 agencies became open access organizations. This is one example on how UNGIS can help create synergies. The same can be said for WSIS, but obviously on a much larger multi-stakeholder scale. UNESCO, through its programmatic mandate, brings opportunities and issues related to digital transformation, brings them into the WSIS action lines. It does this by fostering dialogue and exchange, empowering people, promoting inclusive development, and amplifying the positive effects of digital innovation and digital transformation. UNESCO work on the WSIS outcomes helps move the information society towards the development of inclusive knowledge societies, beneficial to human development. In line with the WSIS Action Line C7, UNESCO works towards the implementation of the UNESCO recommendation on open educational resources, at the civil, institutional, and regional levels. This UNESCO recommendation is the first of its kind internationally as a normative instrument that embraces openly licensed educational materials and technologies in the field of education. The annual multi-stakeholder and high-level dialogue co-organized by UNESCO, ITU, UNDP, and UNCTAD also helps to establish a concrete link between ICTs, frontier technologies, and the achievement of the SDGs. As an example here, the WSIS Forum special track on ICTs and indigenous languages helped us build coordinated action involving the commitment of all stakeholders to the recently launched International Decade of Indigenous Languages. This high-level launch took place this past December 17th. It helped raise awareness of the critical situation of indigenous languages around the world and contributed very much to fostering international cooperation in this domain. Action is now being taken by many partners and stakeholders to promote multilingualism and linguistic diversity in cyberspace. I would like here to thank the WSIS Forum's special track on ICTs and indigenous languages for helping to build momentum on the run-up to this high-level launch event. On your second question, Gitanjali, regarding the challenges ahead, let me say a few words briefly. We believe that these challenges are, first of all, multidimensional. So we need places like the WSIS Forum where multiple stakeholders come together, work together to define the solutions for the future. We are witnessing incredible technological advances. Thomas referred to this in his opening remarks. At the same time, we are also experiencing the potential and pitfalls of powerful generative AI applications, such as chatbots. What can policymakers do to encourage innovation while addressing the risk in this rapidly evolving AI field? One of UNESCO's response is to facilitate international and multi-stakeholder cooperation to deal very much with the new challenges posed not only by emerging technologies, but also by converging technologies, such as the merging of AI and neurotechnology. UNESCO has positioned itself at the forefront of the global debate in addressing ethical issues raised by these rapid developments, with the adoption that took place in November 2021 of the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence. This is the first global normative instrument in the field, and it constitutes an ambitious and wide-ranging new template for the ethical development and deployment of AI. Artificial intelligence can also be used to track and meet the SDGs. UNESCO is now publishing a set of guidelines aimed at empowering member states through a set of concrete actions to support data openness. These are based on the vision that outlines context of findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data for SDGs, as well as a strategy for leveraging data for AI applications. Being the UN custodian agency for monitoring SDG indicator 16.10.2, tracking progress towards the public access to information, UNESCO deploys its Internet universality indicators as one of the key instruments to counter challenges to meaningful access to information, and also to maximize opportunities to ensure the upholding of our 4 fundamental principles, referred to as the ROAM, R-O-A-M, meaning a human rights-based, open, accessible, and multi-stakeholder approach to technological development and the deployment. Currently, we have 44 countries across 5 continents using the UNESCO Internet Universality Indicators to carry out national digital assessments. I invite all stakeholders to join the dynamic coalition of Internet Universality Indicators in designing Internet policies for the development of their digital and social environments. Just before closing, let me mention that on the challenges that regulators around the world face with respect to digital platforms, UNESCO is currently coordinating a multi-stakeholder set of consultations to co-create regulatory guidelines for digital platforms. The aim is to assist member states, regulators, tech companies deal with the potentially harmful content, harmful to human rights and to democracy. In this regard, UNESCO is very pleased to coordinate this debate and to organize a global conference this coming February from the 21st to the 23rd at UNESCO headquarters in Paris, gathering all key stakeholders from ministers of member states to regulators to the private sector tech companies to the UN family, civil society, academia, intergovernmental organization, obviously as well, in order to take a view and to share information on what should be these guidelines for regulating digital platforms to ensure information is public good and to counter the public hazard or the public harm of digital platforms. Sorry if I was a bit long. Let me stop here. Thank you all for your attention, and I invite you all to take part in our conference next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jelassi, for the responses that we're all very much patiently and carefully listening to. The contribution from UNESCO has been immense since the launch of the WSIS process, and we look forward to the UNESCO sessions at the WSIS Forum in March. I will be co-moderating this session together with my colleague Gitanjali. And before we move on to the next speaker, I would just like to invite all panelists to turn on their camera. We're expecting the next speaker to join us, Honorable Nima Lugangira. Not sure if one of the panelists is our dear colleague, parliamentarian from Tanzania. If not, we'll try to get back to her later. And the next speaker that I have a pleasure to introduce and announce is Mr. John Paul Adam, Director of Technology, Climate Change and Natural Resources Management Division of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Welcome, Mr. Adam. Please, the two questions we would like you to respond to are: what strategic role UNEC is playing to promote inclusive and integrated digital cooperation across the continent to help accelerate the SDGs and contribute to WSIS action lines? And the second question is, what are the biggest challenges for Africa in achieving SDGs and implementing WSIS action lines? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Vladimir, and allow me to also at the outset thank the previous speakers from UNESCO and also from ITU. And we are delighted as ECA to be part of this process, to be co-chairs of this process. So just in terms of the role that the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa is playing in particular, we have already recognized that digital transformations are a pillar for us to accelerate sustainable development across the continent. It is very evident to all African countries, and this is reinforced by the polycrisis that we are currently seeing around the world, that business as usual will not deliver the level of acceleration that we need. And what we do need to address is how we integrate digital technologies within the value chain in Africa, the production of goods and services, and in a way which then helps African countries to grow their economies and invest in a sustainable future. One of the main areas in which we have focused our efforts has been on the launch of the African Trade Exchange digital platforms. And this is building on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, where we saw increasingly to be competitive, firms had to be online, had to offer payment systems, and had to be able to deliver also online. And the African Trade Exchange program goes a bit further. It offers a platform, but it also offers a link to financing, trade financing through Afrexim Bank, and therefore is one of the building blocks of the full implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is currently being implemented. In addition, we've invested a lot in capacity building, and that has been particularly around coding camps, where we have supported connecting African girls to digital skills, and almost 30,000 young women and girls have participated in these coding camps now since 2020 in the midst of the pandemic. Meanwhile, we've also been emphasizing capacity building for STEAM education in Africa, in particular, rethinking STEAM education in the context of the fourth industrial revolution. And in that context, we are currently working with the government of Rwanda to establish a center of excellence for innovation in these sectors, in particular, to ensure that STEAM education is brought to young people at a very early age in early childhood education. And of course, we were delighted as well to co-host with the government of Ethiopia the Internet Governance Forum, which took place in Ethiopia at the end of last year. And I think this was a great moment. It brought together partners from around the world, and it also showed how digital technologies will play a key role in the work that African countries intend to do, and in terms of the investments that they intend to do. In terms of the challenges, we are aware that the biggest problem in Africa has been to channel investments into these new technologies. And one of our main focuses is ensuring that there are appropriate focus on investing in these digital technologies using the African Digital Transformation Strategy as a lever to raise those investments, and looking at that through the context of the African Union and the Program for Infrastructure Development, PIDA. There's also a big focus on connecting those who are currently unconnected. The last mile connectivity is a huge challenge in Africa. The digital divide is large in terms of incomes, in terms of gender, and in terms of also the rural and urban divide. And we have to address all of those divides simultaneously. And cybercrime is also an increasing risk, and we have been focusing on trying to tackle this by building capacity through, for example, a model law on cybersecurity, which was launched at the recent IGF. I'll stop there for now, and thank you for giving us this fantastic platform for sharing.
Thank you, Mr. Adam, and we look forward to continuing this discussion later this session. And of course, again, look forward to welcoming you in Geneva headquarters, or virtually, as our event is fully hybrid during the week of 13th to 17th of March. Our next speaker is Ms. Mei Lin Fong, Chair and co-founder of the People-Centered Internet and Impact Network. She has been a very strong stakeholder of the WSIS process and the WSIS Forum, contributing to its several different activities and initiatives. Welcome, Ms. Fong. We would like to ask you, how can WSIS process advance SDG 5, the gender equality? And also, for example, if you can share, can WSIS support the findings of the 2023 UN Commission on the Status of Women report on innovation and technological change and education in the digital age for achieving gender equality and the all women and girls? Please, Mei Lin, the screen is yours.
Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here to talk about SDG 5, gender equality. And I want to remind us how the WSIS Geneva Plan of Action highlights the importance of digital gender equality. This is the Declaration of Principles. We affirm that development of ICTs provides enormous opportunities for women, who should be an integral part of and key actors in the information society. We, WSIS, are committed to ensuring that the information society enables women's empowerment and their full participation on the basis of equality in all spheres of society and in all decision-making processes. To this end, we should mainstream a gender equality perspective and use ICTs as a tool to that end. And I speak personally to say that ICTs have given me a career and a role that brings me to this point, that I am a beneficiary of how ICTs has allowed a woman to change her life and to actually help to invent one of the largest technologies being used today, the CRM, customer relationship management. I helped to pioneer that 30 years ago. It's now a $40 billion industry. But when I celebrate the occasion of this panel, to say how the WSIS process can advance SDG 5. I believe WSIS can take a leadership role in implementing the recommendations of this important UN Commission on the Status of Women report, because it's the very first time that digital innovation has been addressed in the UN Commission on the Status of Women. I was proud to be co-chair of the expert roundtable to develop these recommendations. And this is taking into account such a topic central to WSIS, digital technology in relation to the status of women. In 2022, People-Centered Internet, which I chair and co-founded with one of the fathers of the internet, Vint Cerf, we worked with WSIS to launch the WSIS Gender Trendsetters. And through this, we can expand the impact to increase real on-the-ground action for the 2023 report of the UN Commission on the Status of Women. How can digital innovation and education increase the empowerment of women and girls? This is so related to my personal story. I am so enthusiastic about it. This UN Commission on the Status of Women report is signed up for all UN agencies and then negotiated with 193 countries. And thus the recommendations can have impact and power, but only if we make the recommendations known and track with the help of women's groups in each of the 193 member countries, whether the implementation of the recommendations has begun, is underway, or has been completed and achieved so that we can celebrate. And here is where WSIS has an increasingly important role. The WSIS Plus 10 vision for WSIS beyond 2015 calls for mainstreaming gender issues across all WSIS action lines, and from strategies and planning through to implementation, to ensure action lines surround everyone working on WSIS action lines, take account of continuing gender issues, redress discrimination, and contribute to ending violence and harassment. So our plan for Gender Trendsetters in 2023 is to reach out to women's groups, to identify spokespeople in each country, to nurture and advance their voices to be heard, to be acted upon at all UN forums and beyond. So we, the WSIS Gender Trendsetters, are calling each of you who are hearing this to follow through with the WSIS open consultation process to propose panels about how we can enact the recommendations of the UN Commission on the Status of Women on how digital innovation can empower women and girls. Together, at this important time, we can ensure that the UN Global Digital Compact, which is to be signed next year, 2024, can reinforce that future trends for gender will lead to better lives, happier lives for all people, for all genders. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fang, and thank you very much for your contribution to this important topic. We do look forward to follow your lead as also one of the WSIS Gender Trendsetters. We are also looking forward to expanding the topic of gender mainstreaming at the WSIS Forum and beyond that in its special initiatives, and we look forward to be welcoming you also in March. Our next speaker is Mr. Liberato Bautista, President of the Conference of Non-Governmental Organizations in Consultative Relationship with the United Nations, the famous Congo, coming both from USA and Philippines. Welcome, Mr. Bautista. How does the Conference of NGOs view partnerships, and why do you think it is imperative for ECOSOC as much as to civil society to collaborate in implementing and achieving the vision of Agenda 2030 and the SDGs? And Congo, as Congo and WSIS have been in close collaboration, would you be sharing with us a bit more about this collaboration and its importance in your own work on the ethical dimensions of knowledge and information societies?
Thank you, Vladimir. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good day to all the participants here, wherever you are. Thank you for having me again in another WSIS event. My response to both the questions start with an organizational one. a celebration of the partnership between Congo and the WSIS process. Gitanjali and your team, we have enjoyed the partnership, and that I celebrate because it is a model of consultation, of collaboration and cooperation among varied actors who have been given access to physical premises as well as access to the substantive promises of the WSIS agenda. I will come back to a nuancing of what I call the dynamic of premises and promises. Both multilateral and the multi-stakeholder approaches to doing work can be successful and meaningful if conducted under conditions of just and democratic governance, but also in consideration of uneven development of economies and differentiated responsibilities on the common challenges we face at local, regional, and global spaces. Development justice, about which the SDGs should be and are about, must be equally about digital justice, the equitable deployment and access to the implements of digitalization, including ICTs. For Congo, the Conference of NGOs, these understandings underscore the reality that stakeholders have, by design, unequal reach and access to the levers of power and resources, including digital resources. There is wide agreement that the full and successful implementation of the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development relies on partnerships among governments, multilateral institutions, the private sector, including the business sector, and the widest breadth of civil society groupings. But let's be clear, these groups access and deploy power and resources variedly. For the expertise of civil society to be fully harnessed, civil society must have an expressed and greater access to the physical premises of decision-making halls, but especially multilateral and intergovernmental institutions like the UN and ITU. For NGOs to contribute meaningfully to the recovery of people and the planet from the pillage of pandemics and the devastations of climate change, NGO voice and agency must be afforded access to both multilateral premises and participation in visioning and shaping the substantive promises of the UN. The Agenda 2030 and the SDGs are substantive promises of the UN. This is key to NGO partnership, their voice being heard and their expertise being tapped. On the second question, Congo has a long and fruitful relationship with ITU and the WSIS process, where in 2003 and 2005, the Conference of NGOs played a central role in promoting and facilitating cooperation among the civil society families in the meetings in Geneva and Tunis that launched the WSIS process. We have standing agreements between Congo and ITU in regard to the fruitful cooperation and partnership in this regard. The platforms that the WSIS process have afforded NGOs is a model for such partnerships. They point to the direction of achieving digital justice, which is co-constitutive, I might say, with environmental justice and development justice. WSIS and Congo has a long history of partnership, one that is substantive in both access to premises of each other's meetings, as well as access to their substantive agenda. NGOs in Geneva and Tunis spoke of the various dimensions of ICT, but even more so on the ethical dimensions. In the context of the Agenda 2030, such ethical dimensions come in even greater focus because ICTs must redound to the enhancement of the dignity and human rights of peoples and the securing of sustainability for the planet. The digitalization of knowledge and the digitization of information in all its applications, but especially in industry and commerce, are fraught with moral and ethical considerations. And this vexes our imagination of how might indeed digital justice can be used as a lever for the achievement of the Agenda 2030. I want to close by saying that the partnership of Congo with the World Academy of Art and Science in its partnership with the United Nations Trust Fund for Human Security in the campaign called Human Security for All is an example of a partnership. Recently, the partnership was exhibited profusely at the most recent Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, where the meeting of the titans of the ICT industries agreed to put human security and digital security and the achievement of the SDGs as focus. How better can you get with partnership with industry, thinking of digital security? And then last week, in closing, the 9th edition of the annual symposium on the role of religion in international affairs, which is a collaboration and partnership between UNDP and faith-based organizations, focused again on human security, and the UN Trust Fund for Human Security and the World Academy of Art and Science participated in including not just the idea that human security is co-constitutive with digital security, and therefore the flourishing of life on planet and the flourishing of life for people are twin concerns for partnership. So, ladies and gentlemen, I celebrate the partnership between WSIS and Congo, and between Congo and other multilateral agencies, because in my view, it has prioritized, WSIS that is, it has prioritized the relations of peoples and their agendas in the pursuit of these goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liberato. We also celebrate these partnerships that make WSIS process unique, having this multi-stakeholder approach. We worked very closely with Congo for many years, as you mentioned, since the very beginning, like most of our participants and speakers today in this meeting. But we also work with other stakeholders, and your contribution, overall contribution, a joint effort is the most important. As we have seen since 2003 and 2005, the world has changed, the technology has enhanced, made impact, contributed to development, advancing SDGs, but also proved to be indispensable in the times of the global pandemic as we had. Often this is led by different stakeholders, sometimes the industry, as you mentioned. And this gives me a pleasure to invite our next speaker, Mr. Michael Wilms, a partner and director from the Boston Consulting Group. Welcome, Michael. We would like to first recognize and appreciate your presence as one of the speakers coming from the private sector. And in this regard, we would like to ask you two questions. There seems to be a wide consensus that digital technologies and connectivity can indeed help accelerate progress on SDGs, as we've heard from all speakers today. From your experience, can you provide us with some concrete examples on how universal access to connectivity and digital technologies can indeed shortcut the way to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development? And as much as said about the role of partnerships in addressing SDGs, in fact, SDG 17 is about revitalizing the global partnership for sustainable development. The Boston Consulting Group is a knowledge partner of ITU's Partner to Connect Digital Coalition. Can you tell us more about the P2C and the role of this coalition and its participants could have in supporting a global partnership effort towards universal connectivity? Please, Michael.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vladimir, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone on the call. I think coming back to your first question, how can digital connectivity and digital technology help achieve the SDGs? I think we see many different examples now materializing across the world. I think first, in general, digital connectivity helps drive incomes and also GDP, and typically also in a green way, if we may call it that. Obviously, the drive of incomes already helps improve performance against many of the SDG goals, including clearly poverty. We've seen quite a few examples that connectivity allows small entrepreneurs, also in emerging markets, to rapidly grow their business, to employ many more people, and thus really make a village or a community a much richer and better to live place. If you then look at specific SDGs, let me highlight one of the initiatives that ITU and UNICEF already started quite some time ago, which is GIGA. GIGA's goal is to ensure that every school is connected to the internet. And what we've seen also in a visit we did in Rwanda to one of the pilot schools, having access to connectivity for schools, especially in the context of Africa, is a huge difference. It allows these schools to sort of jump from teaching via, just posters written by the teacher to using YouTube. Obviously, there's a huge jump for quality education across the board. Another example that we clearly see is around hunger. The use of big data, data-driven processes, drones to see, okay, which crops actually need additional watering, etc., has the potential to massively increase agricultural yields. And if we can get that to work on a wider scale, this will help enormously in driving out hunger. Maybe a last example, which we've seen help quite a lot, or which at least has the prediction or the potential to help a lot, is the AI-based prediction of floodings. I've been working with a company that specifically tried to predict some of the floodings in Mozambique. It looks like they now have the AI in place to predict in a very targeted way where a flooding will occur a couple of days in advance. Obviously, this can massively help to minimize the massive destruction that such disasters could play out. And especially in the light of climate change, obviously, these kinds of capabilities are becoming even more important. Turning to your second question, obviously, partnerships are essential. And as you said, we have been a knowledge partner of the Partner to Connect program since its inception. I think clearly the Partner to Connect coalition has been a great success. As Thomas already said, we are at almost 30 billion of pledges. I think there's still 20 million or so missing. And then we can celebrate that huge milestone. For those of you that don't know Partner to Connect, it is a multi-stakeholder alliance launched by the ITU in close cooperation with the Secretary General Envoy on Technology, and also in line with the WSIS action lines. What we're trying to do is to connect governments, NGOs, UN agencies, and the private sector to ensure that we can most effectively mobilize new resources to meaningfully connect everybody globally. I think, as we all know, still about 2.7 billion people are not connected. And one of the most interesting features of telecommunication infrastructure is that it's the only infrastructure globally that is predominantly privately financed and privately owned. That means that all of these partnerships across the private sector and government, but also between various private sector players, be it telcos, digital firms, local entrepreneurs, etc., is essential to make this complex ecosystem work. And what PTC is doing, and I think has shown that it can very effectively do, is bring these people together to solve the issues on the ground across the key pillars of PTC, ensuring that we connect people in an affordable way, that they know how to use it, and that they also can use it from a language perspective. I think the issue of many different languages not being able to be used online was already mentioned before. And then thirdly, build digital economies and digital societies on top of that. And only together in partnership can we make sure that we realize the goal of connecting those last 2.7 billion people and ensure that we can really harness the power of connectivity to help realize the goals of which I mentioned some examples earlier around the various SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much for sharing this input. We are much pleased to hear from the Boston Consulting Group on this analysis on the importance of partnerships, the technology itself for accelerating SDGs, for meaningful partnerships and collaborations. And we do look forward to hearing more from BCG, not only through P2C, but through other collaborations with those members from the United Nations family, but other stakeholders as well. We also look forward to be welcoming you and the Boston Consulting Group at the WSIS Forum in March, and to see how can we enhance these discussions. Before we go to our final segment, I would like to recognize the presence of our colleague, Minerva Novaro from the UNDP. Welcome, Minerva. Since we have you here today with us, we would really much appreciate if you can share a bit on behalf of UNDP how this progress and how important partnerships are, and do you have any plans that you would like to share with us towards the WSIS Forum in March?
Thank you so much, Vladimir. It's been a pleasure to listen to all colleagues speak about the importance of an inclusive digital society and economy. And good morning to all colleagues, excellencies from New York. And it's a pleasure to join, as always, colleagues from across the UN system, the UN family, and with civil society, private sector, and all stakeholders of the WSIS. Just something, a quick reflection from our end. UNDP is always ready to work with all partners, especially on delivering on the goals of sustainable development. We all know the urgency in these times, given in particular the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the socio-economic impact, and obviously on the health and prospects of all people and communities. Bearing in mind that the impact had been severe, especially in developing countries, and it will take them years to recover. That's why the theme of this year's WSIS Forum is really on supporting efforts to not just build back better, but get countries back on track towards the 2030 goal. And partnerships are critical to all efforts, especially here in UNDP. As you know, UNDP is in over 170 countries and territories, and all efforts that we do with the governments and communities, we can't do that alone. We need all the resources, the expertise, and the know-how, and the commitment of all people, and not just governments. And UNDP looks to WSIS, in fact, for all of this capacity building requirements that we do. We can't just work with governments, especially noting once again that the goals of 2030 agenda really is about improving lives. It's not just delivering the benefits to people, but making sure that all people are engaged in the effort and that they themselves shape and steer the pathways towards inclusive development. So just to underline, some of our speakers already noted this, that the engagement obviously is not just within the government, but national government. We know we are a member state organization, but that the engagement really should be from the local to the global, and from the rural to the urban. SDG 11 is one of the SDGs being reviewed this year, and we are reminded that there are concurrent agendas that our partner governments are trying to achieve, and one of them is a new urban agenda. And WSIS has a lot of stakeholders that are involved in building the kind of cities that we envision in the 2030 agenda and in the new urban agenda. And one of the things that we need to also focus on in WSIS, and I think we have started it in the last WSIS Forum, is to engage local stakeholders, from the local governments to the local communities. And we now have a Mayor's Forum in the WSIS Forum. And that is a very good development, in fact, and we need to do more. We are looking forward to a WSIS forum that will widen the engagement across all stakeholders, and noting that we are also preparing for the Summit of the Future next year. And the efforts that we do now will have a huge impact in the kind of future we envision for all countries and for all communities. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Minerva. Thank you for sharing the insights. We do agree that we need to look further from beyond just the event in March, that this is something that our efforts will be better known as with, what results will it bring in the future. Of course, coming up to the high-level event in 2024 and the second final review from the UNGA in 2025. We do invite everyone here today present to contribute to this year's forum by submitting your proposals for the requests for the workshops, sessions, speaker slots. Tomorrow is the deadline for you to contribute and help shape us the program and agenda of the WSIS forum. But more than that, reach out to the WSIS Secretariat and everyone else, all the WSIS stakeholders, to create these partnerships, promote the use of ICTs as a powerful tool to make impact, make sure that this is on everyone's agenda. And of course, to see how we can work together towards achieving the SDGs. 2030 is coming up quite shortly, and we need to use this momentum of its final phase to see how we have been working so far and what we can do to reach and advance the goals that were set up by the community. I would like to use this opportunity at the very end to thank all our speakers. Thank you very much for joining us. I know that many of you have made extra efforts to be with us. So once again, it's been a pleasure to moderate this session, to hear from all of you. We will be sharing the recording of this session on a dedicated webpage of the WSIS Forum website. And we look forward to be welcoming all of you in March. At the very end, I would like to ask my colleagues to share the WSIS Forum 23 partners video. Once again, thank you and greetings from Geneva. We are having some technical issues with the video, but we make sure that we will add this to the recording. So once again, thank you. The session is over.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.